Welcome to Mystara for a new video that isn't part of the 1030 timeline, I promise. We're going back to look at a city, this time Oenkmar, the hidden city of Aztec humanoids that were a major part of several nations' history and sparks a rather nasty war in the Poor Wizard's Almanac. Sure, it's got a silly name, as Orcs of Thar was set in the TSR silly phase, but its history and purpose are one of the few serious parts of that gazetteer. So what's the scoop on this town? How do you get there? And what are the best reviewed taverns as determined by Yelp? I'm Mr. Welch, and pardon my Immortal. The city of Oenkmar, formerly Angmar, originally appeared in Gaz 10, the Orcs of Thar. That's the only place it appeared until the time skip caused by Wrath of the Immortals, where it suddenly started getting love from the Poor Wizard's Almanac series. Several color maps are available for the city. Just go to the Vaults of Pandios. It should pop up immediately. Remember, Oenkmar is spelled with an E, not an I, when you do a search. The rest of the art for the city and its inhabitants are rather just grid style, or done by the late, great Jim Holloway, so you're getting a specific comedy style that the book's detractors will often bring up. Oenkmar's history starts with the Shadow Elves and ends with the Shadow Elves on a cliffhanger. In 1700 BC, the Elves were trying to find shelter from the Glantrian Holocaust that created the Broken Lands, which was caused by the Elven inability to stop pushing pretty blinking buttons on nuclear devices. It's an odd racial trait for a fantasy race, but the Elves do seem to be drawn to flashing lights on atomic bombs like moths on a flame. The Shadow Elves went underground to avoid all the fallout and found refuge in a cave filled with lava, which, oddly enough, was the safest place available. They fell under the sway of everybody's favorite patron of corruption, Adzanthiotl, who instructed them to build a magical city that would float on the lava. He protected them from the fumes and the heat, and the city of Angmar was finally finished in 1290 BC. The city was built in the Azcan style, as their patron loved for his followers to copy the architecture of his favorite culture. Nothing in the city even looks elven when it was done. It was just lots of stone buildings, a ziggurat pyramid in the middle, and some pretty gardens. Then Adzanthiotl waited for his elven followers to gather their strength, rise up, and conquer the world. And waited. And waited some more. And realized the elves were not in a hurry to repopulate their species, especially since it required sex, and worse, sex with another person. So he flooded the city with fumes and removed his protections, driving the elves out, which angered him because they were supposed to die when he killed them. This left Adzanthiotl with a fully constructed city, but nobody in it. It became the Randall Park Mall of Mystara for a whole century. It's hard to find a real estate agent for large properties floating on a lake of lava. So Adzanthiotl came up with a new plan. If he couldn't bring new subjects to Angmar, he would bring Angmar to his new subjects. He created a hole in the cavern above, increased the pressure of the lake, and shot the city up to the surface of the Broken Lands for the humanoids to discover. Then he created a simple +1 dagger that had the effect of glowing blue to draw on the orcs and similar creatures that were questing for the legendary blue knife. He had his new followers. Until the Nithians arrived and started corrupting the orcs that Adzanthiotl had already corrupted. He seethed at the idea that somebody else was better than him into tricking people into bad life decisions. He couldn't do anything against the orcs because the Nithian immortals would counter him, at least until the Nithians got themselves vanished and left the orcs unprotected, and utterly oblivious to where they got all this cool Egyptian stuff. Adzanthiotl had had enough of the surface and sent the city back to the lava lake. Coincidentally, only his followers survived the fall, so the relocated city was once again loyal only to him. He just had to kill thousands of humanoids in the process. The patron immortal of corruption isn't exactly in the running for Humanitarian of the Year. In the years following, the humanoids lived in darkness thanks to their dark vision, where they discovered the ancient carvings of the elves deep within the temple. Here they found the original name of the city, Angmar, which as the centuries progressed, changed into Oenkmar, because pig orcs, get it? The humanoids started speaking in an ancient form of Elvish, believing their ancestors built the city in time immemorial. They developed a society faster than other humanoid races, as they had a city to live in, and didn't have to hide in caves or fight amongst each other, though they still like to. They were still the same orcs, goblins, and other races on the surface. They were cruel and bloodthirsty, but in a more focused and established way. There's about 18,000 Oenkmarians today. They are very aware of their cousins living in the world below, and even journey to the surface when needed. They consider themselves the pinnacle of humanoid culture, viewing the others as mere savages not worth their time. They will still kidnap a few when needed. The sacrificial altars of Adzanthiotl are constantly flowing with blood. The usual victim is a kidnapped humanoid, but any humanoid will do, and demi-humans are treasured above all. Even better, they can sometimes capture something exotic like a deep glorant or a geonid. If a humanoid finds and enters the city, they are held as captives, as the priests view anyone able to find and enter Oenkmar as worthy of joining their society, after at least 2 decades of schooling and brainwashing first. The city grows fungal crops in a district called the Oenkmar Garden. Additional food is brought into the city through skin wings, a form of winged reptile. While enough to feed the city, the priests of Adzanthiotl create most of the food to keep the population dependent on them. Water is provided by waterfalls that regularly pour into the lake from above. The water is then turned to steam, which condenses above Oenkmar, causing it to rain. The showers come at regular intervals, once per day. When the rain starts, that signals the humanoids that it's time to sleep. They sleep during the 2 hours of the rain, plus at least 4 more afterwards. And a portion of the city is under curfew during these showers. The city is comprised entirely of stone buildings and divided into 7 districts. Oenkmar is notoriously cramped, with the streets rarely running in a straight line except in the most important areas. Temple Hill is the highest point in the city, and it's where the Temple of Azantiotl can be found. The religious quarter is below this and houses the servants of the temple. And again there, TSR uses the word quarter to indicate a part of the city with more than 4 parts. Downtown survives the religious quarter on 3 sides and houses most of the working class. The Citadel district is home to the wealthiest humanoids in the city, while the Enclave houses the poorest. The West Bend is a poor neighborhood, home mostly to miners. The Great Temple is at the center of the city, which is visible no matter where you are. A defensive wall surrounds Oenkmar, created long ago and reinforced during its time on the surface. While the humanoids have little to fear from a ground assault, there are a lot of flying nasties in the world below that can prove to be a threat, and minions from the Plane of Fire have attacked the city on numerous occasions. Guard duty is not taken lightly, as Oenkmar is a favorite target of the Efreet, and fire elementals love the tightly packed alleys. The city keeps many of the old original elven trappings, even though they don't know the true origins of their past. They still use the coins minted by the elves centuries ago, though only gold and copper pieces. Silver and platinum are rare in Oenkmar, and electrum is also by default. The coins are left over from the elves, and all the imagery on them is long since faded out. The Oenkmarians believe these coins to be of orcish creation, but they don't know how to strike coins. Oenkmar is one of the more detailed cities in Mystara, including the layout and the little things that would happen in an entirely underground city. The Oenkmar day is only 18 hours long. They keep track of their days by the start of the rain. Mechanically, this only affects Oenkmarian spellcasters. You still have the 24-hour schedule if you're a visitor. There's a continuity issue on whether the city floats on the lava or is an island in the lake. If it's floating, it won't align with the various areas for the rain or the visitors that fall from the cavern above. If it doesn't float, how did it get propelled through the opening above to reach the surface after the Shadow Elves were driven out? You can always blame Immortal magic, but the original problem still stands. If you plan to vacation in Oenkmar, here's a tip. Don't. Nobody visits Oenkmar. It doesn't welcome visitors, tourists, or traders. There are no hotels, inns, or hostels. Anybody asking where they can find a place to stay is obviously an intruder, because everybody in Oenkmar has a place to stay. Space is at a premium, but there's no homelessness. If you don't have a home, you're a drain on resources. Drains on resources have a date with the sacrificial altar. There are regular patrols to make sure no one has infiltrated the city, usually during the rains. Anyone acting like they aren't natives of Oenkmar will be detained. Despite being such an insular society, there's a lot of internal strife due to the chaotic nature of the humanoids living in the city. The orc Zemanga leads a gang of ruffians who like to cause violent acts for thrills. They tend to dress in studded leather armor, sport mohawks, and decorate themselves with tattoos and face paint. They would usually be considered a minor nuisance, but their antics have caused severe harm to Oenkmarians on multiple occasions. For this reason, they keep local lawyers on retainer. And yes, Oenkmar has a well-developed legal system left over from the elves. The top lawyers in the city are Tupac, and Son. The legal system is mostly about who can better shout down the other side's witnesses, but there is a judge, a jury, and an actual trial. Tupac, and Son specialize in personal injury cases, a steady business in Oenkmar. They handle every aspect of the trial, from dealing with the judge to preparing witnesses. By preparing witnesses, I mean they hunt down complainants and beat them into staying silent. There are numerous recreational businesses all over Oenkmar. If you want to gamble, there's Zapotek, where all sorts of bets are placed. Ixta Utla's steam baths are popular with the wealthier citizens. Tlachtli games are played in Azantiotl's arena, the game where you have to hit the ball with your knees or elbows through a hoop on the wall. Coahuaca's Peyote Den is a high-class drug parlor, where high-quality peyote allows for astral travel. It is pretty expensive, though. The Mummification Shop provides Oenkmarians exquisite luxury funeral wraps on their death, a rather impressive local status symbol. The most impressive structure will always be the Temple of Azantiotl. This ziggurat takes up much of its quadrant and has the city library attached. The High Priest rules from the pyramid, looking down upon the city from its highest point. The library contains many old elven works, though the history books that detail the actual history of Oenkmar are securely locked away. Nobody wants to go to the pyramid unless they're a shaman, as few regular humanoids return from such an invitation. Next is a topic I thought I'd talked about enough recently, but we're going to look at Emperor Eusebius, from his rise as the next crown prince to his time as emperor during the almanacs. Who is the next emperor of Thyatis, and how does he compare to his father? Until next week, remember, if the Emperor ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.